Welcome to Gavel. I'm your host, Cobb District Attorney Vic Reynolds. We're excited to be back in the studio with our partners here at TV23 doing our second episode of Gavel. This show is about the criminal justice system in Cobb County. Our goal is to educate and inform our citizens about a system that remains a mystery to most folks. As you may recall, our first show centered around the different types of courts within the criminal justice system here in Cobb. In the future, we're going to be taking a look at items like jury duty, where you go to get a gun permit or a marriage license, subjects that affect all of us at some point in our lives. But today we're going to take a little bit different look at the Cobb criminal justice system. We're going inside of a clerk's office. We're going to talk a little bit about the functions, the duties, and the responsibilities of a clerk's office and what they do daily, often behind the scenes, to keep the Cobb criminal justice system up and running. And in that respect, we're very honored today, and I'm very pleased to have as our guest a friend of mine, Miss Angie Davis. Angie is the clerk of the Cobb State Court. Angie began her career in magistrate court, where she was the coordinator of the volunteer mediation program, a program that's still up and running today. From that position, she was named as the court administrator of that court, and in 2000, she moved over to the Cobb State Court, where she was the chief deputy clerk. And last year, she made it to the top of the mountain. She was named as the clerk of the state court. I know from firsthand experience that she and her staff do a tremendous job for the citizens of this county. Angie, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share a little bit about what the clerk's office does, what our responsibilities are, and how we fit into the judicial system.
Well, thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Let's start at the beginning. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about the Cobb State Court and some of the functions that the clerk's office performs?
Okay, well, the clerk's office is responsible essentially for maintaining the court record. We maintain the record. We're responsible for collecting all the fines, the fees, the court costs that are associated with the cases that are filed in our court. And then we're also responsible for attending all the court sessions. So essentially the cases begin and end with the clerk. From officially filing the paperwork to processing all the paperwork that's filed in throughout the life of the case, to then disposing of that case once the court renders a final disposition. Upon the final disposition and disposing of that case, there are also some processes that may follow, some requirements that we have to follow in submitting a disposition to the Department of Driver Services, or possibly by law we may be required to submit that disposition to the Georgia Crime Information Center, or in some instances to both of those agencies. Our office is very administrative in nature. To most effectively deal with those administrative functions, we're divided into 4 different divisions, and we're supported by a total of 76 employees who do a great job day in and day out, maintaining those fines and fees and the record, maintaining the record.
Let's break that down a little bit. Let's say that somebody, for some reason, has some filings they need to do in Cobb State Court. In other words, we'll talk a little bit more specific in a moment, but let's say that they want to file a lawsuit.
Okay.
Do they go to the judge's office and file that, or do they literally come to your office and begin the process?
They would begin the process in our office. Okay. If it were a civil filing, they would come to the first floor of the state court building located on the Marietta Square, and then they would file that initial paperwork there. All of the pleadings, everything that's to be filed officially on a case needs to come to our office.
I believe if I understood you a moment ago, you said that you literally have to be present in the court room when things happen on any case. Is that both civil and criminal cases?
Correct. On civil and criminal, we have a court clerk that's assigned to each courtroom, and they're essentially the custodian of the record while that court proceeding is ongoing. They make any kind of notations that need to be made on the file, anything that needs to go on the record, on our court docket, and also would mark any evidence on the case.
If you're in court in the middle of a lawsuit and a lawyer or a litigant needed to file a paper, you would have a clerk in that courtroom to file that paper with.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. And we have an official file-in stamp that notes the date and the time that the document is filed. And so they could do that in the courtroom, or we could do it in our office.
And that file, either in the interim of a lawsuit or when the lawsuit is over, it's a responsibility of your office to keep that file. Is that correct?
Correct. And there are state-mandated retention schedules that dictate how long we keep a civil filing, a traffic case, a misdemeanor case that we follow.
We talked a little bit on our last episode of Gavel to Gavel about the different court systems and the different types of filings, and by that I mean civil versus criminal. When I say civil, I'm talking about general lawsuits. Are those type of cases handled in state court? In other words, would there be lawsuits filed with your office and things of that nature?
Yes, in that civil division, we see civil lawsuits, anything from a collections case to a product liability to medical malpractice, as well as garnishment cases and dispossessory cases that are commonly referred to as evictions. So all of those filings would occur in our civil division.
Before we move on to talk a little bit about criminal cases, you're obviously the clerk of state court, as we introduced you a moment ago. Does every different court system, Superior Court, probate court, magistrate court, juvenile court, do they all have clerks who run their clerk's office in those systems?
Yes, each of those courts have their own clerk that would be responsible for the administrative functions. In some instances, those clerks are appointed. In some instances, those clerks are elected.
Now, yours is an elected position, is
The
that
state
correct?
court clerk is an elected position, and Superior Court clerk is an elected position.
All right. When will you actually be up for election again?
I will be up for election in 2016, and I actually run with the Chief Deputy, Robin Bishop, and we run on a ticket together every 4 years.
Good. Let's move on a little bit away from the civil lawsuits and talk a little bit about criminal cases that affect folks. We talked a little bit in our last show about the difference in felonies and misdemeanors. Which particular type of case would your office be responsible for handling?
Our office is responsible for misdemeanor cases. We have jurisdiction over misdemeanor cases, as well as all of your traffic filings that occur in the unincorporated areas of Cobb. The municipalities have their own courts here in Cobb County, and unless someone requests a jury trial from one of those municipalities, in those cases the case would be bound over to state court.
Right.
But outside of that, it's those tickets that are generated, those cases that are generated in unincorporated Cobb on the traffic side.
Now, how many do you recall how many judges we actually have in state court?
We have 12 judges in state court, and we're divided into 2 divisions.
Okay, we'll talk about those divisions in a moment. So your office would literally serve all 12 of those state court judges?
Correct. We support all 12.
You would have a clerk in every courtroom of those respective 12 judges,
Yes,
is
sir.
that correct? Now let's talk a little bit about those criminal cases. Does each judge handle criminal cases?
Yes, all the judges handle the criminal or traffic cases. It's just the Division I judges that would handle criminal and civil cases.
All right. Now, you're talking about Division I and Division II. What's the difference? Does one division handle something specifically, or tell the viewers a little bit about that?
Division I would handle both your criminal and your civil cases, and Division II would handle just your traffic cases. Division II is traditionally known as your traffic court. Historically, Division I was the only division that handled jury trials, but in recent years, jury trials have been added to Division II as a function of their role. So we have jury trials in both Division I and Division II.
Well, you would think a county this large in the unincorporated portion, you all would have a high-volume clerk's office. A lot of tickets and cases come through there?
Yes, state court is definitely a high-volume court. On the criminal side, I believe last year we had approximately 80,000 cases filed, and that's criminal and traffic. And then on the civil side, we had 8,000 cases filed last year.
So we're talking a lot of cases you
A
all
lot of
handle
cases.
day in and day out. Let's talk a little bit about something that probably some of our viewers can relate to. What happens when you get a ticket? In other words, what can a citizen in our county expect regarding your office, the clerk's office, when they receive a ticket?
Okay. If an individual receives a ticket, there is information on the back of that ticket that kind of guides them a little bit through the process, or at least the beginning part of the process. There's information on the front side of the ticket on where they need to appear, their court date, their time that they need to arrive in court. On the back side of the ticket is more information regarding how to get payment information, how to find out if they can pay their ticket without making a court appearance. The determination as to whether or not an individual has to appear in court or can pay for their ticket without making a court appearance is determined by our judges, and it's set out in a Traffic Violations Bureau bond order, what we call a TVB bond order. That information is also available on our website, and an individual could go look at that order and see all the offenses that are may be payable without making a court appearance, and the fines associated with those. So the first step would be to determine whether or not they could pay it without making it a court appearance, or whether a court appearance is required.
So there would be some occasion where an individual could look at the information on the ticket, perhaps look at your webpage, and make a decision whether or not he or she wanted to pay that fine, if they could, and not ever make a court appearance. Is that correct?
Correct.
All
And
right.
they can pay that fine online. We have an online ticket payment system that has been in place for a number of years and is very efficient and is used in approximately 40% of all the cases that are payable cases. We receive those payments online.
Well, good. Well, we're going to take a little break, but when we get back, if you would be thinking about this, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when an individual believes they're not guilty and they
Okay.
want a trial regarding a traffic ticket, all right?
Okay.
Thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned. We'll be right after this break and complete our conversation with Angie Davis, the Clerk of State Court. Thank you.
Wake the sun, tell him that I've begun to dream of things to come, and tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
Welcome back to Gavel. I'm your host, Cobb DA Vic Reynolds, and we're speaking with Miss Angie Davis, who's the Clerk of State Court. Angie, before the break, we were talking a little bit about what folks do when they receive a ticket in Cobb. Let me give you an example. Let's say that somebody receives a ticket and they decide, I'm not guilty. I don't want to pay a fine. I don't believe I've done anything wrong. Constitutionally, they would obviously be entitled to have some form of trial, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what citizens would do in that case, what the procedure would be to get that trial.
Okay. That individual would need to show up on the date that appears on their ticket. They would need to show up at that particular date and time. They would go into the courtroom. They would check in there. There's typically a court personnel that's at the front of the courtroom. They would go and let that court personnel know that they're there, that they're requesting a trial. The actual trial date would be scheduled at a later date.
So it wouldn't necessarily be that date on the ticket.
They would not receive a trial the date that's on the ticket. Those are called our traffic arraignment cases. If that individual decided to plead guilty on that date, then they would speak with the judge, they would plead guilty, and they would pay their ticket on that day. But if they decided to plead not guilty and contest those charges, then that court date would be scheduled later on down the road.
So they would literally come back on the date given to them on arraignment date, and they would plead their case or try their case in front of that judge, and the judge would make a decision about the ticket. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, I know your office can't give legal advice. I think you're statutorily bound or restricted from doing that. But do you recommend that folks hire or that they need an attorney before they come to court, even on tickets?
They're not required to have an attorney, but they certainly may do so, and oftentimes do.
So that's an individual choice of that citizen, depending on whether or not he or she wants to.
Yes.
Let me give you another situation. Let's say that in a worst case scenario, someone either forgets or doesn't come to their court date, or they refuse to pay their fine. Can you talk to the viewers a little bit about some potential consequences for folks who don't follow through on that?
Several things could occur depending on the circumstances or sometimes the particular offense that somebody's charged with. If someone fails to appear in court, there is an additional $65 that is assessed on that ticket. That's probably the lesser of all the consequences, because if they fail to appear, their license would be suspended and may result in a bench warrant being issued for their arrest as well. So some pretty serious consequences.
So literally, if someone misses a court date or doesn't think it's important, even on a ticket, they have the potential of not only having their license suspended for a period of time, but also the potential of going to jail. Is that correct?
Correct.
People need to go to their court dates.
They need to go to their court dates. Very important.
Let's talk. Let's move a little bit away from the civil and the criminal part. I know anytime you run any type of office and you're the head person there, there's frequently things that are expected or the citizens may think your office does that they don't do. Are there some myths about the clerk's office that people need to understand aren't true, or some things that you want to help them understand what your functions are a little better?
Probably on the traffic side, one of the most common questions we get is callers or people who visit the courthouse wanting to know how many points are going to be assessed if they pay this ticket or if they plead guilty. And our office is not responsible for assessing those points. And it may vary from state to state how points are assessed, but it's the department that issues the license that would make those determinations. So if a traffic case is disposed in our court, depending on the offense, as I mentioned earlier, we may be required to submit the disposition on that case to the Department of Driver Services. At that point, once it gets to that agency, those points are assessed. I do know that the Department of Driver Services has a lot of information on their website that might be able to guide individuals and give them the information they need as to, if I plead guilty to this offense, it's going to, I'll be assessed 2 or 4 points on my ticket. So, but that's a common question that we get that we're not able to provide the answer.
And that's one of those functions where perhaps if someone had retained a lawyer, they may very well have that information.
Correct.
Or minimally, you would think before someone comes to court, even on a traffic citation, they need to do a little bit of homework to see where the lasting effects may be. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes just the fine itself is not the only consequence that may result if they had received tickets in prior years and already had points that were on their license. It could definitely have an impact, and an attorney could help guide them and advise them on what those potential consequences might be.
And before we leave this area, I think the viewers need to make sure they understand too that sometimes your age will have a tremendous effect on what happens to your license.
Definitely the case for our younger drivers.
Yes.
For there are laws that, for good reasons, require stiffer consequences for those under 21
Certainly.
Drivers who are just new to the roads. So.
Let's talk a little bit about something I know you're always interested in, and that's legislation, how it affects clerks' duties and things of that nature. Anything happening, has happened recently or is in the horizon legislatively that would affect your office you want to tell the viewers about?
Probably the most recent would be this past legislative session, the 2014 session. There was a Senate Bill 386, which is going to have an impact on civil filings, and I think in a positive way, but definitely something that we're trying to get the word out about the requirements under this new law. And essentially, anyone who is filing a pleading or a case in the civil division on a civil case is required to, if there's a Social Security number or a financial account number or a tax identification number or a date of birth, that full information may not be filed in those pleadings. So if it's a Social Security number, you can't file the whole Social Security number on a document. It could be the last 4. If it's a date of birth, it could be the year, but not the full date of birth. Obviously, this is a move, I believe, to try to help protect
Certainly.
Everyone's information to prevent identity theft, identity fraud. But the burden is on that filer. As a clerk, we don't have the authority to refuse to accept the filing. So we're definitely trying to communicate to the local law firms, our common filers, and the public through our website, at our public counter areas, that this law is now in place and that information needs to be redacted or restricted in the filing.
Well, it certainly sounds like a common sense law, and
Yes.
I commend your office for getting that message out. That leads me into another area. I know you personally and your staff are a big proponent of customer service, and I know you push that with your folks, and I see it day in and day out. Tell the viewers, if you would, how important that is to you as an elected official in serving the citizens of this county.
It's extremely important. It's the crux of everything we do. As a record keeper, and our staff hears three main points day in and day out, and that's as a record keeper, we've got to be accurate, and we've got to process the record efficiently. And the third piece of that, to be successful and to properly represent the citizens of Cobb County, we've got to provide great customer service. Those 76 employees are on the front lines, either on the phone or dealing with public over the public counter areas, and they do a fantastic job. But they know that it's a priority and that it's important, and it's not just necessarily a piece of paper that they're processing. There's a life behind that. There's a person behind that, and that's just essential to keep that frame of reference.
Well, I commend you on that, and I will tell you and tell the viewers that as district attorney, your office and I don't have that much contact anymore, but in private practice, I saw the customer service reflected daily by your clerks and by the people who work in that office, and you do a good job. Before we wrap it up today, let me move into another area as we conclude that I know is also very important to you, and that's technology. And I know it's certainly important to our viewers and the citizens of Cobb. Tell our viewers a little bit about any technological changes that your office has made and some new things on the horizon that may affect your work.
Okay, I'd love to. One of our goals over this past year was to try to make the public's interaction with what is sometimes a confusing judicial system and a confusing process to improve on that. And technology is definitely helping us reach that goal. Historically, a clerk's office is driven by paper. The files and the papers that are found in our case files are precious commodities in our court. So technology is now allowing us to look at those files and those papers in different ways, and that's by being able to scan and have images of those filings. So no longer will we have to travel 2 flights of stairs to a remote file room to pull a file to assist a customer. Now we can go to the computer system, pull up those images, print off the necessary information, and certify those documents. So it's definitely a smarter way to work, it's more efficient, and it provides that better customer service.
Well, that's great. I commend you for that. And let me again tell you what a good job your office does. I compliment you on that. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of the citizens for all you do, and we certainly appreciate that. And most importantly, thank you for watching Gavel to Gavel today. Stay tuned for future episodes. I'm your host, Cobb DA Vic Reynolds, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks for calling the GED Pep Talk Center. Jerry Stiller speaking. Your level 7 in-your-face pep talk.
I can keep pushing you. Believe me, I'm good at it. But at some point, you're gonna need to start pushing yourself.
See, once you've got your GED diploma, you'll feel so good about yourself.
You tell them. You can't change your past, but you can definitely change your future.
That makes me so happy, I'm ready to bust out a dance.
Mr. Trejo, can I transfer this guy to you? My gentle technique isn't really working. You need something a little more...
persuasive?
Yes.
You listen, and you listen good.
Hey, where's my sandwich? Terry? Jerry!
Take it from me, the King DMC. It's a real cool thing to get your GED.
Get that diploma!
Now hold on and we'll find you free GED classes. Capiche?
Whatever motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Get your GED pep talk and find free classes at yourged.org.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
A full life, measured in seats, starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are the #1 killer of children 1 through 13. Learn how to prevent deaths and injuries by using the right car seat for your child's age and size.
Learning how to kickflip 6 stairs takes determination. So will getting into college. I've got what it takes. So do you.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. Get fire adapted now. Learn simple steps at fireadapted.org.